Hello, my name is Philip Espy. I'm a Filipino-American Children's Library Associate at the Cleveland Park branch of the DC Public Library. The discussion in this video took place in November 2020 as part of our DC Reads program, centered around Mira Jacobs' wry and intimate graphic memoir, Good Talk, a memoir and conversations. Taking inspiration from Mira Jacobs' accounts of the slights and insults that permeate her life as an Indian American woman, I was joined by Lupita Aquino, Reggie Cabico, and Ashley Corin for a rousing roundtable. We discussed microaggressions in our lives, or the subtle, intentional, and unintentional acts, such as comments or gestures rooted in implicit or explicit racism, sexism, homophobia, or more, in a cathartic and lively discussion. A half year later, as we celebrate Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, we wanted to revisit this conversation. The past 6 months have brought our country's attention to the refreshed tide of Asian xenophobia and hate, erupting most violently with the mass murder of primarily Asian women in Atlanta. As we talk about microaggression, we also realize the macroaggressions against communities of color. Microaggressions, intentional or unintentional, contribute to the dehumanization of marginalized groups. That dehumanization process erupts in macroaggressions. As more people are being held accountable for their racist actions, we realize that accountability is not equatable with justice. Justice for the lives of the global majority is when our lives are not threatened by systemic racism and white supremacy. We encourage you to explore the DC Public Library's resources to aid your conversations about race. Find a list of our recommendations at dclibrary.org/conversations-about-race, or click the link in the description below. We hope this conversation illuminates the struggles and the hopes that we have for our community. Hello, everyone. My name is Philip Espy. I'm a library associate with the DC Public Library, and I'm welcoming you to our conversation talking about microaggressions as part of our DC Reads program. DC Reads is our citywide book club, and this year we are talking Good Talk by Mira Jacob. I'm joined here with two illustrious colleagues from DC to discuss microaggressions and the ways those impact our lives. I'd love for you guys to introduce yourselves.
I can go ahead first.
Yeah.
So, sorry. My name is Lupita Aquino. I am really kind of active online with the literary, community. And before the pandemic, I would host a book club in Solid State. And so it's just a little bit about me.
Great. Ashley?
Thank you, Philip. And Lupita, I'm really excited to be speaking with you this evening. My name is Ashley Corin. I am the Women's History Content and Interpretation Curator at the National Portrait Gallery, which is a part of the Smithsonian. I also work with other amazing librarians from the DCPL for a collaborative book club that we host about 4 times a year. So really happy to be here.
Mm-hmm. Great. And what is it? I can't get my sports metaphor right now, but the 4th and 5th people on our conversation is you that are watching this conversation right now. Please, 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 those of you on YouTube and on Facebook, join our conversation by commenting along with us. We want to know your stories as we're exploring this book. You see popping up right now. We were able to talk to Mira Jacob this Sunday. A really engaging chat with her, and we'd love for you to take a look at that. If you have also grab a copy of the book, you can go online to our website, dclibrary.org, to request a copy for pickup at one of our physical locations, or we have unlimited ebook and audiobook copies available online. So we are talking microaggressions today, and you may be sitting there going, what exactly is a microaggression? We are going to be using a working definition by Dr. Kevin Nadal. And Dr. Nadal defined microaggressions as the everyday, subtle, intentional, and oftentimes unintentional interactions or behaviors that communicate some sort of bias towards historically marginalized groups. And this is one of the many focuses in Myra Jacobs' Good Talk. Good Talk is a graphic memoir by Myra Jacob that takes us through vignettes of conversations throughout her life, from a child to her adult life now, raising a son. It is a meditation on race in America, herself being a first-generation Indian American, and the mother of a biracial child. She is married to the filmmaker Jed Rothstein. And we explore this idea of Americanism and race through the eyes of her life, but also through the eyes of her child, kind of culminating and climaxing with the 2016 election of Donald Trump. To Lupita and Ashley, what were your initial reactions to reading this book?
I'll start off if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. No, go ahead. Yeah.
The one thing that I loved and appreciated so much about this book is that it was funny, right? It was vulnerable. It was honest. At times it was, heartbreaking, but it was just funny. And, there's so many books that are out there that, deal with issues regarding, what it means to be American and dissecting, who gets to claim that identity, but none of them are funny. And so I really appreciated that I could think and reflect and do some own sort of critical self-reflection, but I could also laugh. What I loved is that, she was telling, you mentioned this earlier, right? Like trying to, it's really important to be able to connect your story with what's happening, right? This idea of we're able to learn more through reading and listening to each other's stories. And I really appreciated her putting her story out there like that, right? Like literally putting the story of her and her child out there. And then one last thing, because I'll be quick, what I really appreciated as someone whose own personal experiences include, being in environments where I don't really fit in anywhere, or I don't quite fit in, or I feel like not understood. I really could relate to that part of her background and some of the moments that she was sharing with all of us. So,
yeah, Lupita, what were your thoughts about this?
I mean, I think you really nailed it, Ashley. That's all that I felt when I read it too. I think it was refreshing to see someone asking questions, not just her son, but even herself, kind of in this ability to present us with situations in which, she wasn't perfect. And, I felt like that was really important, because I don't think she gave a lot of answers so much as, she kind of let us go through the questions that she was coming across herself from her son, but also within. So I think that's something that I really loved and really resonated with me about the book. And it's like you said, it's so funny. I'm so glad you said that, because I think, people are really touched by how she, how touching it is that she's talking about her son, and, but it's really funny. So totally agree.
Yeah, Ashley, you mentioned to us as we were developing this conversation, a conversation with Myra Jacob and her son about Michael Jackson. Could you talk a little bit about that? And David, do you think you can pull up some of the images from the book about this?
Yeah, and if you could find one where he asks, what is a LaToya? Because that's literally my favorite line in the entire book. Z is asking these succession of questions about the Jackson family. And for those of us who lived through the 90s and late 80s, and understand LaToya Jackson as this polarizing figure, having this 6-year-old ask about her is pretty amazing. So I really appreciated that, right? And what's really interesting too is this idea of questions about race can be very serious, right? And very sort of philosophical, and but they're having a very serious and nuanced conversation about Michael Jackson, right? Michael Jackson is the the catalyst for this really fantastic analysis and conversation between someone who's probably like 6 at the time,
Yeah.
and this adult having this really interesting conversation about race. And what I love is that she never backs down or belittles his questions, right? She's always engaged with Z. And although it might be really annoying to have someone ask again and again, like why someone's skin looks a particular way, I do love the fact that she's trying to engage this child in these conversations, right? Because there's so many, I know, adults who, engaging in any conversation about race, right? They choke up, they change the subject, right? Or they focus on their own sort of feelings of guilt and inadequacy, and to sort of see a child engage in a conversation this way was really fantastic. And to be able to have a nuanced conversation, anybody is capable of that. And I feel like that's what I loved about this passage, is that one, it was funny. Two, it incorporated, just the importance of how, people belittle pop culture, but pop culture can help us really understand who we are, right? And also that you can have nuanced conversations with race with anybody, right? You just have to have two people that are open, and two people that sort of have this level of trust and intimacy with each other who are willing to go there. So.
Yeah. Lupita, did you have anything, any moments that stuck out? I think you mentioned things again, also that the humor and joy in this book. I was wondering if you had anything.
I mean, it's hard to really pick just one. I think I felt like there were certain chapters that she hit at the end where it was almost just kind of like it made you hold your breath. And you just kind of realize, like, okay, she's going through with these big questions, and these big questions just don't have answers, right? And even for her son, I felt like for me that just felt really real. And like you said, her never belittling him or even kind of shunning his curiosity, because I think that with children, like, I mean, it's so easy to kind of like traumatize them, right? And just the balance that she kind of constantly does as a mother, to be able to be like, okay, like encourage it without, I don't yeah. So there was so much there.
Yeah, I like how we're talking a lot about like experiences of these things as children. I think it kind of, segueing into a little more about like these experiences in our lives outside of the book. They're for me, like the moment in the book that really hooked me in was on page 59. It's in a vignette about her winning a Daughters of the American Revolution speech writing contest. And in the midst of, one, they misdirect her and her teacher to the wrong place, so she can't give the speech. And that very sternly faced teacher that you see on your screen right now insists on finding that outpost, finding the meeting for the Daughters of the American Revolution, having her give that speech. And then then she says, as quoted in the book, she says, "Mira Jacobs, I'm going to tell you something. I want you to listen closely. You are American. Do you understand me?" And that's when I had just like flashbacks of like, I've had that conversation before with my family. Like, I remember being a kid I was a Navy brat, so like all over the country. I remember being a kid in second grade in very white Newport, Rhode Island, growing up, and having to explain like what I was, and like constantly to people. And my mother sat me down and says, "Ethnically, you're Filipino. I was born in the Philippines, and your dad is Filipino, and you're Filipino." which like is really hard to explain to, other second graders that don't know any concept of Asia outside of China and Japan, to which I remember very clearly a conversation where somebody just decided I was Japanese because me explaining the Philippines to them was just too much. I guess 8-year-old. Oh, and 8 years old. But my mother really emphasized the fact that we are American citizens and that we're from here. Um, and it was so, I felt so seen by her book in this page. Like, it was the moment where I was like, where it felt there's different ways I think different races have talks, and this was one of them. I think for me, I we're and that's like I think as we're talking about microaggressions, I think it's interesting to think that these things begin when we're kids and they continue now.
Yeah.
I was wondering what you guys thought about that.
I'm glad you brought this up because I think that this is something that I remember during the author talk that she mentioned, basically like at the moment, not really understanding what that moment meant to have her teacher and what her teacher did, because I think for her, like you said, her teacher was just a stern woman who was like, you do this, you do that. And then she's just telling her, you're an American. And so just, I think she mentioned like in the author talk, like, it was a big thing to realize it later, like when she was older, that, what this woman did for her in kind of giving her that ability to be like, that moment where it's like, you are an American. And I don't know if I've ever had a moment like that, where someone, it's not a validation. It's more so like someone sees you, right? And they see what you've been through. And then they say to you like, you belong here, like just like everybody else. So, yeah.
I totally agree. And I also, wonder, I mean, because we're talking about the experiences of mainly people who are underrepresented, right? But like, what does it mean that you have to start, right? You're starting at that level of being hyper aware of who you are, and your peers don't have to, right? Like, what does it mean that, these children, right? And I'm thinking about the experiences that you've talked about, but also experiences that I've had. I mean, I was bused as a child. So I don't know, for those that are not familiar with being bused, I'm from the city in Boston, and then I was sent to the suburbs to go to elementary school. I was one of the few sort of Black children in the entire elementary school. And this idea of, children being very hyper aware, or children of color, or children with disabilities, or children, who are outside of the box, being hyper aware of who they are, and living with that, and the possible toll, right, that it might take on someone to have that hyper awareness, and to always be thinking about who you are, and how others perceive you, or how others might be perceiving you, right? Just the thinking about, the toll that it takes, and also, going back to her relationship with her son Z, it's kind of like trying to reframe that, right? Like, this is sort of her, it felt like it was her attempt to reframe that, right? So he wouldn't have the same experiences that, she would have, and being able to say, like, I don't want you to have the same, I don't want you to feel the way that I did when, folks were sort of shying away from accepting me for who I was, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. And I think she mentioned that too in the talk, where she was basically like, it was hard to remind herself, like, he's not you, but yeah, he does experience some of the same things that you have, right? So, yeah.
What to you and to anyone that's watching out there, what are those tolls? I mean, I have, I think it's, for me, I think I am just now starting to, surprisingly, to engage with like my identity as Filipino. I remember in sophomore year of college, I wrote an ethnography of Filipino like the Filipino musical experience like in the Catholic Church.
Oh
And
my gosh.
like
What a title.
it was so I could really, it was so my field experience could be like going dancing with a bunch of old Filipinos in uptown Chicago. But it was it's interesting for me to like that was the one of the first times I've ever like sat down with my parents or sat down with my grandparents and say like, how do you experience Filipino-ness while being an American? I think that's it's a super, and looking back, it's super interesting that I've never really had those conversations. Like that is a told, I feel like now that I never really engaged with my race until adulthood. Um, what do you guys think about that? Speaking of other Filipinos, Reggie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh my God, there are two Filipinos on the internet on a virtual box. This is unprecedented. I am always the only queer Filipino ever in a box. So now it's sort of like,
There's two of them.
yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. I'm really honored to be with you all. And so thank you. And I apologize for my delay. But
so looping you into the conversation, we're talking kind of about what are those added up tolls of these microaggressions? What do those things feel like to you guys?
I think I think for me, it's sometimes kind of reflected in self-doubt, right? So sometimes because they feel like they might be like phrased in compliments. Like, I don't know if you guys seen on Twitter, there's this trend that's like, what feels like, what's like not a compliment, but feels like one or something like that. It's basically like that. Like, you just don't know sometimes, like, am I being too sensitive, or is this really like, did this really just happen? Or I think for me, it's been a lot of that, and almost kind of like where I think I was talking to you, Philip, where you gaslight yourself, right? Where you're just like, and I think in the book, Mira, there's situations where she is like, kind of like, am I being too sensitive? Like, or is that real? So
should we pull that up for people watching? David, maybe pull up page 192, 193. This is a vignette where she takes on a freelance writing job for a white woman. And things like she says, this white woman says, I have to apologize, I was thrown when you arrived. And she says, don't worry about it. And then says, she says, the truth is, I'm glad you're half Indian. And she goes, no, I'm full. And she says, I feel like we can connect because of yoga.
Yeah.
And
oh man. Yeah.
I mean, I hear this like sigh from everyone of like, oh, I felt this before. Can you tell me about those feelings from any of you?
Yeah, I'd love to jump in. First of all, I think that this is definitely one of the there were so many memorable moments. I think what's beautiful in what Mira Jacob crafted in this is that the woman is annoying, but you're also she's also a sad person and a damaged, injured person, and flawed but damaged, and I think that's the beauty of this scene. And because it looks like this woman has grown attached and has what is sort of the plantation white woman who has the slave who she confides in, like the nurse in Romeo and Juliet. She's like, oh, let me tell you my problems. And so there's all of that that irritates me. Now, when I have a microaggression, and it's like, it would be a true one. I'm an usher in a theater, and another usher, this other white woman will say, are you Hawaiian? And to me, that is a microaggression because I don't get to look at her and say, "Are you Alaskan?" And you know what makes her say that if we don't know each other? So it is those things that have been bottled up. And I turned 50 this year. And so I grew up in an era where blackface is acceptable. There was a time in the 80s in Soul Man and in sitcoms, there was a lot of blackface. And that was certainly acceptable. And I think there are just things that are just not acceptable anymore. And and there is an intergenerational culture clash that add to what is acceptable, what's a oh, they don't really mean anything by that. So I'll just stop there.
I also want to point out that this particular scene, too, right? There's this imbalance of power, right? Like Mira is working for this woman, and so for her to literally call her out, right, puts her at risk. And I think that's something that's really important to remember, right? When we're talking about the toll that it takes, like there are a lot of people that may have been bottling stuff up because they can't afford to risk saying anything, right? They can't afford to even ask a question, right? Like even if Mira were to say, why do you think that? Or I don't quite understand. Could you please explain yourself, right? Or anything along that puts her at risk for losing her job and she needs money, right? And so a part of the toll is almost accepting that these things will happen, right? And there may be moments where you can't say anything. I mean, you always have the ability to say something, but depending on what kind of situation that you're in, sometimes you really can't, and that's a horrible way to be, right? Like being in situations where you can't even stick up for yourself, or the ways that you would like to stick up for yourself, you can't. And so I think that's a part of the sort of overall toll.
When you're talking about like that risk, like what are those things that you decide? When are the situations that you decide to address something or not address something? I think it like when is there the right time to push back when you feel like somebody's being aggressive? Ashley, would you like to continue?
Yeah. I'll go for it. So honestly, it depends on my mood, right? Like if I'm not having it, I'm not having it. Right? Like if it's an opportunity where I could literally just walk away from someone as they're saying something stupid, I will. Like I'll do it. If I can think of a canned response, I will. So like, for instance, for example, I've been at the Smithsonian for over a year now, and I can't tell you how many times I've gotten the question, so how did you get that job? How did you get that job? And I've gotten this from visitors at the museum, people from my own community, people in my own networks. I mean, just people literally like straight up asking me, so how did you get that job? And for those that are watching, in case you're unaware, asking a Black woman how they got a job is not acceptable in any fashion, right? Like it's not acceptable to ask that question. There are other ways, right? You can ask me how I prepared for the position that I have now, or you can ask me my background, but asking me how I got a job is not acceptable. And in those cases, I'm pretty glib and I just say, I applied for it. That's how I got it. Like, that's how you get jobs. You apply for them, you interview, you get the job. But there are moments where I do feel like I have to pick my battles simply because I don't have either the mental or intellectual energy to engage, or I'm familiar enough with the person to know that engaging with them is just not going to answer that. It's not going to solve any problems because they either want me to engage with them in that way, or I know that they're not open to listening. So even if I were to respond, it wouldn't even matter. So I mean, it's a case by case basis, really. in terms of how I respond. But I think it's incredibly important, and I'm sure everyone else here will understand that it's really important to take care of yourself first, right? Like you come first. Whatever happens, you come first. Yes, it's important to speak up, and yes, it's important, to ask someone to break their bad habits, but at the same time, you have your own energy that you have to maintain and protect.
Philip, in response to your question about when do you push back, it really depends on the stakes and the money and the involvement, because there are some microaggressions. I'm a spoken word poet. There is another Asian poet, Bosia, and people say, "Oh, oh, you must be Bo," and I'm sure people will, as we work together, people will call you Reggie, and they'll call me Philip. And so to me, these are really benign microaggressions, but they add up.
Mhm.
And it's just tiring. Now, I would be honored if people thought I was as handsome as Philip, but that's not really the point, you know? And it goes back to not being seen fully.
Yeah.
And being like lumped in with a different category, or what someone's idea of a person is, like a Black person or a Mexican person. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think anywhere I go, I always get, where are you from? Right. That's like the big question. And I mean, it's like, it's so benign, right? It's not a big deal. And so I feel like it's not until recently where I've just been like, okay, I'm from Kensington, right? And people are like, okay, but where are you from?
Where are you really from?
Maryland. Like, so I mean,
Baltimore.
right. So it just like I think that, I mean, you're totally right. I think you really got to pick and choose your energy, right? Like what you invested in, and sometimes it's just not worth it. And I mean, I think that's another toll it takes, right? Is the amount of having to say, okay, I need to educate, right? Because it's essentially what it becomes a chance for someone else to be educated on something that they could have Googled or would know better than to ask, right? I mean, these things aren't things that just don't exist somewhere on the internet. I don't know.
And there's a couple things I want to say, Lupita, which are complement what you've been saying. One, asking somebody where are they from, right, with the intention of trying to figure out whether they're a citizen or not, or trying to figure out whether they're from another place or not, is intellectually lazy. Because first of all, we live in the United States, right? People of color have been in the United States before the United States was even the United States. So for you to make that assumption is just very, very lazy. And two, you're not people. We are not entitled to other people's information. Like, we are not entitled to know anything about anybody else, right? And so part of that, those questions too, are about entitlement, right? Feeling entitled to know something about the person sitting next to you you've never met before, right? Or the person on the airplane, right? Like, there's a level of entitlement that's involved with some of these questions of microaggressions.
And speaking of entitlement, it's going back for another section of the book. I don't know if you addressed it, but when she's at the bar mitzvah, and now she's the servant of the because that was entitled, and I'm entitled for you to get me that because you're the only brown person here. So why are you here? So serve me my drink.
Mm-hmm.
We could, if you want to pull that, we can pull that up.
Spoiler alerts everywhere.
257, just for people at home to see what we're talking about. The Bar Mitzvah. Yeah, can I just tell a story real quick just about my favorite "Where Are You From" story? If we're like just giving air to these things that are happening, my favorite story is I'm a classical musician, so I was sitting in the lobby before another concert, and an older white gentleman came up, sat down on the bench next to me, and opens with, "I bet you know how to speak Laotian." And And I was like, no, I don't actually. And then proceeded to list all Southeast Asian languages he could come up with, like not hitting on any Filipino language, which I thought was also very odd. And I just had to stop him and be like, you know what? I speak Italian, French, and Spanish because I conduct operas. And he left.
You conduct opera? How did you get that?
Oh yeah. We point to I applied for school, right? I think it's a really I've never thought of it that way, Ashley, before you said it, that it comes from a place of entitlement of other people's lives. I think that's really, really a really interesting thought. Another in the comments right now is Nick asked, which I think is a neat thing for us to talk about. Does the term microaggression excuse or comfort the perpetrator? I think another thing I think we can also ask is, in the context of a time when there are macroaggressions about race, what is the utility of us talking right now about microaggressions per se?
I feel, well, the macroaggression is this administration, and like the last 4 years, that is a huge, big macroaggression for me. But and it's sort of between the macro and the micro has just literally been exhausting, and I don't know if we're gonna be able to pull through it. And what I loved about the book in the finale is, as this climaxes into the 2016 election, and here we are now. I just don't. I just don't know what. I just really don't know how to negotiate anymore.
Sorry. It's really interesting because, right, so, the microaggressions are sort of subtle everyday things, and the macroaggressions are like physical harm, right? They're the sort of systemic things that harm others, particularly those that are underrepresented. And so they're both related, right? Because they're both sort of building blocks of sort of supremacy of any kind, right? So that's why they're sort of both connected, because they're both about supremacy. And the thing is, like, they're both, like I said, they both cause harm, right? So in the book, the microaggressions literally cause Mira to be paranoid and feel like she's crazy, right? And so the harm that they both can create are still impactful and horrible. But the thing that I'm trying to sort of unpack in terms of thinking about sort of macroaggressions versus microaggressions is that, at least in the United States, like we have, in terms of macroaggressions, right, we have like anti-hate crime laws and anti-discrimination laws, which like don't exactly always help, but they exist, right? There are ramifications for certain macroaggressions, right? But in terms of microaggressions, in terms of like ramifications, like there aren't any, right? Like you say something stupid or offensive, and nothing happens, right? You're either forced to take like a sensitivity training if that happens, right? But like how do we deal with the fact that, microaggressions can be just as serious as macroaggressions, but there's sort of there's no punishment, there's nothing for sort of microaggressions, right? How do we, what would that look like? And who would be doing, who would be doing it, right? So.
Yeah, no, I agree with both points, and it is hard, right? Because I think that sometimes microaggressions get kind of thrown into like sensitivities, right? Oh, someone's just sensitive, or you're just sensitive, and they're harder to kind of pin, right? And I think that idea kind of makes it more difficult to figure out, like, they are like building blocks, and they do become macro if they're not addressed, right? But how do you address it? Like, who's dishing out the consequences for them?
I mean, again, it's my friend is a teacher in a high school. She's Korean. Her white colleague teacher is like, "Oh, I love the geisha look." Microaggression. What is she going to do? What is my Korean friend going to say to that?
Yeah.
And it does not get, it's, again, it builds up. And then it as those microaggressions happen daily, it really will cause a distance between her and her colleague.
Yeah. I think I like to. There's a question in our comments right now. Carmen asks, "Are microaggressions a form of gaslighting?" And gaslighting is a term that that we are hearing a lot right now. I don't know if any of you want to take a stab at giving us a quick definition of gaslighting, or I can. So gaslighting being the process in which one is fed a series of put downs and untruths that add up, that cause someone to lose their ability to understand what's true and what's not anymore. I don't know if any of you would like to add to that. My on the cuff definition of gaslighting. But Carmen, I think absolutely the microaggressions are like part and parcel of the gaslighting process. Like, you can take it apart from they can happen outside of gaslighting. Like, the man next to me in the lobby was not trying to gaslight me about my identity, but I think it's one tool that gaslighters have in making us question what if we are experiencing the same reality that they are. I don't know if any of you have thoughts about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, non-for-profit has a gala. There's a board member who hits on a staff member. It's a male to a female. It's a little creepy, a little predatory, and then the staff member complains to the executive director and says, "Well, that was harassment." It's like, "Oh no, it wasn't. It's just that's how he is. It's, you know," and it's like, "No, I didn't like being touched like that, or I didn't like being addressed in this way." "Oh no, don't worry about it." It's like, and so that's a gaslighting. Like, going back to your sense, "Oh, you're just so sensitive," and it's like, no, this is, and so it's what the person says that we have to. If they say that that's how they felt, that's how they felt. Just like if I say I am this, then this is who I am. And I think it's not what you think it is, it's what the person actually says it to be.
Yeah, and I also I don't want to derail too much, but I also wanted to bring up, particularly because we're talking about gaslighting, the concept of micro affirmations, right? We're sort of talked a lot about the harm, but I think it's also important to recognize affirming someone, right? If someone who's been the target of a microaggression, figuring out ways to support them, to validate their experiences, and if you do have the ability to do so, to do it in the moment, right? To not wait until everyone is gone and the conversation is over. And this could be things like, in the moment, repeating what someone has, the person who's the target of the microaggression, repeating what they have said, giving them credit, acknowledging their value, because a big part of microaggressions and gaslighting is undermining someone's value, right? That's a big part of it, right? It's undermining someone's value and undermining their humanity and undermining, right, the fact that they're a complex human being. And so, one of the things that I've been working on is, focusing less on giving energy to the person who has done the microaggression and more towards figuring out how to support the person who has gone through the experience, right? And I think that that's something that in the book, made me really sad, was that she really didn't have a lot of people who were giving her micro affirmations of the experiences that she was going through, just kind of just doing this by herself, right? And sort of processing all this stuff by herself. But I think it's really important for us to sort of figure out ways to support one another when these things happen. So.
Sorry, no, I was just going to add in. I think that like just having conversations like this, is definitely one way. I think it's great to be able to like say something, then just like see you guys react in the same way that I, react internally that maybe I couldn't have done in the moment. So I think that's definitely important.
In this discussion, it's making me think about the white drama teacher who never casts a person of color because they're not white, so they can't act or they can't be in this role, even though that actor of color has the ability and the talent to really play that part well. I think that is, I don't know if that's gaslighting as it is not being fully seen and or realized or given that opportunity, because, and I see it all the time, and you look at it and how things are cast, and easily you could have had a person of color in this role, but let's just keep this all white. I also see that in casting and where the opportunities go. Those are also, they might even be macroaggressions for me. And very hurtful. And we're going into representation and what is out there and who gets that opportunity. I am going back to another moment in the book. I don't know if you talked about the Daughters of the American Revolution, where she gets to read her essay and she goes, "Well, you are an American." And very, very uncomfortable reading that. And I could almost see myself as someone who did speeches, and I know how white audiences in Southern Maryland saw me in the optimist oratorical class as this other brown person that was trying to speak. And again, makes me think about, where is the representation and how are we, what's being put out there. And anyway, so just wanted to put that on the table as well.
I think just because I follow these things, but in terms of like representation on stage, there is an actor, and oh my gosh, I can't remember his name, but he wrote a tell-all of his experience of being in the cast of the Frozen musical spectacular at Disney California Adventure in Anaheim. So in the original concept of bringing Frozen to a theme park stage, the directors decided to allow actors of all races sing Anna, Elsa, and Kristoff. And it was like this warm, welcoming environment when the original directors were there. And when those directors left, all hell broke loose.
Where can I find this?
I will send it to you guys after the conversation. Yeah, but he wrote this tell-all story of just like when the original directors left and it stopped being in the hands of somebody that was looking to have different people on stage representing these characters. All of a sudden, like this actor was going from singing the lead roles and then going back into ensemble tracks because white people needed to see white actors be Anna and Elsa because how could they not? I will say my favorite Elsa of the Broadway run is a Black woman, Ciara Renee, and oh my gosh, can she belt far greater than Ms. Menzel? And I will leave it at that.
Wow, shots fired.
A friend of mine, Diana Huey, was Ariel, the Little Mermaid. She's Vietnamese, and she's an amazing performer. But when she did the national tour, there were white audiences who were outraged. And it's like, she's a mermaid. She's a freaking mermaid.
It's kind of like the Hunger Games when people found out that Rue, right, when they casted her, that Rue was Black, one of the characters. And it was like the way that readers had read it, they thought that she would be white. And then when they casted the movie, I was like, no, what are you talking about? No, like it doesn't have to be a white character because that's how you read it. So.
And what's crazy about that too is that the author didn't have a problem with it. No. And like it didn't, and they still were angry, like still mad. Yeah.
What do you think having more representation of different people in popular media and in art is going to do about this issue of microaggressions? Do you think?
So that's a great question, Philip. Because I think the issue is not, I mean, representation is an issue, right? But a part of it too is, how do I say this in a way that is not necessarily polite, but it's like, people have to, this is going to be really crass, but like people really have to get over themselves, right? They have to get out of their own asses, right? Because a big part of it isn't just representation. It's like, no, you need to do the work. You need to listen to people. You need to meet new people. You need to get outside of your circles, right? Like a big part of it is like, there are so many people who have been doing the work for so long. So many people who have been doing on the ground in systems everywhere, right? Who have been doing this work, and unfortunately, representation just isn't enough, right? Like people really do have to do the work internally, right, to change their behavior, right, to be able to correct themselves whenever they say something stupid, right? And so, like, representation is fantastic, but if the folks that are managing that representation haven't changed themselves, right, or are doing it for superficial reasons, it's not really going to, it's not going to go much of anywhere, right? Like you mentioned, right? They switched directors and the whole thing blew up, right? It didn't matter what the concept was, right? Because if the people are in charge are the ones sort of dictating how things go, then none of it really matters. So I think, representation is fantastic. And as someone who works in a museum, I love it, right? Like I love being able to see different people's faces and stories and narratives. But that doesn't change the system, right? The representation doesn't change the inner workings of a work environment or an organization, right? I'm ranting now, but like it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Sometimes people just need to do their research. I mean, the internet is there.
Yes.
Do your research. Stop asking me what this Tagalog word means. Like, I'm not going to give you a glossary. I'm not a glossary. I am not your research. Yes. Oh, I'm casting a female version of Hamlet. Can you give me exercises on gender? Because I know you're part of that world. Like that world, you're part of that world. Like what worlds? The Little Mermaid's world? No, do your own research. And I'm just going to vent a little bit, just in terms of appropriation, what I'm seeing, and as speaking to a fellow Filipino.
Sorry, just David in this comment.
I mean, I was about to say that too. Yeah, I am actually professionally here for your questions. But go ahead.
But what I wanted to say is, and Philip, like they have the ube flavored ice cream on Trader Joe's, which is a hit. And ube is sort of a potato purple vegetable that's now popular in donuts and ice creams. When Trader Joe has it and it's off the shelf, they never say where it's from.
Mm.
They never talk about its origins.
Mhm.
They never acknowledge the country that has really cultivated its flavors. And it's like, come on, and you're making like it's just stuff like that. Um, Call it appropriation, call it colonialism, talk it a microaggression, call it ignorance, stuff like that. I have no patience for, and I'm tired of our food being exotified, Philip. So when I was at a Filipino restaurant that is gourmet, there's the balut egg, which is a chicken embryo, which you see in Survivor. And whenever I see hot-looking white fat boys eat this like a dare, part of me is like
Mm.
repulsed. I'm like, that is a real food that people eat. It's not a game. But then the other part of me is also turned on. Like, yeah, you like my balut, don't you? Why don't you suck it? Yeah, crack that egg, crack that egg. So there's all of that mixed emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah, crack my egg, do it, do it, do it. Yeah, you can do it. Yeah, you like
Didn't
that.
see that
Yeah,
coming.
Nope.
You know,
I'm so
chew
glad
on
you
that
brought
beat.
up Balut.
I mean, and I'm just going to add on and just, you know, in terms of representation, the thing that it misses is this like, it's not one person is a single story, right? Like, so you hire one Mexican person or you hire one Filipino, like that one Filipino or Mexican person just has they can have vastly different experiences, right? Like, so when you do your research, it becomes more than just like representation. You would know that in representation, right? Yeah, it's so.
I always look at people. I look in their Facebook. I see, you know, are their friends all white? Like, what are these photos looking like? Who, like, what's their photos, and like, what is the mix like? And I will not date anyone who, if all of your friends on Facebook are white and all of your pictures are white, then why am I here? Like, what is this about?
Mm.
Um, you know, and I think Mira Jacob really addresses the challenge
Yes, she
of
does.
having a white husband, um, and the complexity of that. And I see why they get along. I mean, they came from the same state or region. They grew up together, and I could see how that could really help her assess by having this white Jewish presence for her to understand maybe what she was going through, and there was something benevolent and maybe and genuine about that marriage. And I'm not criticizing that marriage or that you shouldn't be in an interracial relationship, but there are it is a challenge, and I don't know who I'm going to be attracted to or who I may or may not be engaged or married to. But I am single and available. I live on top of Trader Joe's. I do shiatsu. I know that's a little exotic Asian. I also do some stir fry, cauliflower fried
Sir.
rice.
Sir.
Beautiful. That's her platform. Y'all, we're getting to the top of the hour, and I would love for us to kind of just do a little bit of summation. Like, do you foresee a future where we're not dealing with this?
Mm-mm.
What and I think I love for all of us to just reiterate kind of what are the things that what can we do now to make this situation change, evolve, get incrementally better. That's what my therapist says. Like the incremental steps forward mean something. What are those? How are we doing that? You think?
Yeah. I'll start because I actually have this written out. So if you don't do this already, right, I highly recommend following DEAI specialists on social media. So people who are consultants, diversity officers, or admins, or people who are in nonprofits or doing whatever community work who do this work on the daily because they know what's happening. They know how these things work. So if you don't know, please follow these people and learn from them. One of the people I follow, his name is John
We accidentally Solar flares?
It's the supremacists are out to get us. You're invading. The supremacists are here. Oh no.
Can everyone mute and unmute themselves? Maybe. Technology.
It's a sci-fi Black Mirror episode.
Okay. This is wild. Oh.
Okay, I'll be super quick. Basically, one of the things that Sean Page just said is that one of the things that we do need to get over is assuming that everybody has good intentions, right? That's a big problem with microaggressions, is assuming that everybody has good intentions. And one of the reasons why we need to stop doing that is because it assumes that a certain particular type of person is inherently good, right? And so they're able to get away with certain behaviors because we assume that they have good intentions, right? And it absolves us from taking responsibility for the harm that we do to others, right? When we assume that people have good intentions. So it's really important for us to stop doing that. And then, in terms of thinking about, how we can, what we can do to get there. And like we talked about, right? Really providing outlets for people to share their stories, for different types of people to share their stories, so that there is not one singular story, there's not one singular American identity. And for those that have put in the work for a really long time, it's really important for us to be able to give them platforms such as this, right, for different people to sort of share their narratives. So.
Yeah, Lupita, do you have any final thoughts?
I mean, I feel like you covered it so greatly, Ashley. But I mean, like reading more books, right? Like that's why they're here, and engaging with work like this. I mean, there's so many great books out there. Minor Feelings, Just Us. There's a list.
Yeah. We have one on our website, dclibrary.org/dcreads. A lot of great read-alikes. If you're interested in what we talked about today, Reggie, would you like to close out with anything?
We're fucked. What you talk about, Willis?
Well,
we are. I really do feel that, because I teach poetry workshops, a lot of that is about identity, and everybody wants me in the classroom to say, oh, let's talk about this. Let's do writing workshops around race. George Floyd happened. Let's address it. And I think that if it's people of color in the room, it is easy to pull out the stories. What do I do for the non-BIPOC people? How do I get them to talk about privilege effectively, guilt, shame, in a way that they feel that they could participate? I have not figured that out. I'm still trying to, I'm not saying that it can't happen, but that has been always a challenge when I do race writing workshops and then there's a white person there. How do I make it so that way they could listen? And I do say that this is a space where the people of color need to speak. So try not to take up that space, but at the same time, how can they express that? And again, it's not like I'm trying to censor it for non-BIPOC, but how, until the workshop can feel equilateral, I think we're gonna have awkwardness, and the microaggressions are still going to continue.
Well, I would like to thank all of you for wading into such a weighty topic. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. I think we are doing that good talk that Mira Jacob wants us to do. And I really appreciate that you've been so open with your experiences and your thoughts, and your wisdom. We all have wisdom. For those of you watching, we'd love to know about what you thought about this program. Please take time to give us some feedback. There's links in the comments and in the description of this video for a quick survey that you can give us as the DC Public Library, some information about what we're doing. Thank you again to the Institute of Museum and Library Study Services that give us funding to do DC Reads. Go online to our website, dclibrary.org/dcreads, to get your copy of Good Talk and lots of other read-alongs that are that library staff has picked out from our collection. And one more time, Lupita, Ashley, Reggie, thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. I've enjoyed it, and I hope the Washington community learned something, or at least felt a little heard from the four of us today. So thank you.
Support your local library.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, David Quick.
And thank you to David Quick, our fearless leader on DC Reads, and all of us here at the DC Public Library. Wish you a great rest of your week and wish you good reading and good talk. See y'all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.